The wind swept across the Arizona plains with a lonely howl, carrying dust, broken wagon canvas, and the fading echoes of gunfire. Emily Carter stumbled through the dry grass, her breathing ragged, her blue dress torn by cactus thorns and jagged rocks. She had been running for what felt like hours, though the sun had barely moved across the sky. Only that morning, she had been riding west with a wagon train filled with families chasing dreams of new beginnings. Now she was completely alone. Behind her lay burned wagons, frightened horses, and memories she wished she could erase forever. She didn't know who had attacked. She only knew that panic had scattered everyone in different directions. Her father had shouted for her to run. That was the last time she had seen him. Emily's throat burned from thirst. Her boots were worn through from climbing rocky hills. Every shadow looked like another danger waiting to appear. When she finally reached a narrow stream, she collapsed beside it, scooping handfuls of cool water into her mouth. For the first time since sunrise, she allowed herself to cry. "What am I supposed to do now?" she whispered to herself. The empty canyon gave no answer. Several hundred yards away, another pair of eyes had been watching. Dakota, one of the youngest warriors of the Apache tribe, stood silently among the cliffs. His dark hair moved gently with the wind. His bow rested across his shoulder. Unlike the stories settlers often told around campfires, Dakota had no desire to hunt frightened travelers. He had followed the smoke rising from the valley because he feared another conflict between soldiers and wandering raiders. Instead, he found a frightened young woman alone in the wilderness. She looked exhausted. Starving. Lost. His grandfather had taught him an important lesson years before. Strength is measured by whom you protect, not whom you defeat. Dakota watched for several more minutes. She wasn't pretending. She wasn't carrying a weapon. She was simply trying to survive. He stepped from behind a large boulder. Emily froze. Every frightening story she had ever heard rushed into her mind at once. An Apache warrior. Tall. Broad-shouldered. His expression unreadable. She stumbled backward until her heel caught a stone. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought he must hear it. Her voice disappeared. Dakota slowly lowered his bow onto the ground before taking another step. He spread his empty hands. "No fight," he said carefully in broken English. Emily stared. She had expected shouting. Violence. Instead. Silence. Kindness. She didn't know whether to trust him. But she also knew she had nowhere left to run. Before either of them could speak again, a deep growl echoed across the canyon. Both turned instantly. A hungry mountain lion stood atop a rocky ledge. Its yellow eyes never left Emily. She gasped. The animal crouched. Dakota reacted without hesitation. In one swift motion, he grabbed his bow. The lion leaped. The arrow flew. It struck the animal's shoulder, forcing it sideways before it could reach the woman. The mountain lion roared and disappeared into the rocks. Dakota remained between Emily and the cliffs until every sound faded. Only then did he lower his weapon. Emily realized he had never once hidden behind her. He had placed himself directly in danger. Her fear began to change into confusion. "Why?" she whispered. Dakota simply answered. "No, leave people alone." The journey to the Apache village took the rest of the afternoon. Emily followed several steps behind him. Neither spoke very much. Occasionally Dakota pointed toward safe footing or warned her about loose stones. When she became too tired to continue, he stopped without complaint. As darkness settled across the desert, small fires appeared in the distance. An Apache camp rested beside a river hidden between cottonwood trees. Children laughed while elders prepared the evening meal. Women carried woven baskets filled with herbs and corn. It looked nothing like the terrifying stories Emily had grown up hearing. Everyone turned as Dakota entered with the stranger. Some faces showed surprise. Others showed concern. An elderly woman approached first. Silver streaks ran through her braided hair. She gently touched Emily's scraped hands before speaking quietly to Dakota. He explained what he had found. The elder nodded. Without asking questions, she led Emily toward a small lodge. Inside, another woman carefully washed the cuts on Emily's arms with warm water scented by desert plants. Fresh clothing was placed beside her. A bowl of stew filled the room with comforting smells. Emily stared at it. "You, for me?" she asked. The older woman smiled. "For you." Emily had not realized how hungry she truly was until the first spoonful. Tears filled her eyes again. Not because of fear this time. Because after the worst day of her life, someone had chosen compassion. Outside, Dakota sat beside the evening fire while the tribal council gathered. One elder looked at him carefully. "You brought danger." "I brought someone who would have died. She belongs to another world." Dakota nodded. "I know." Another elder spoke. "Our people remember mercy." The oldest among them finally raised his hand for silence. "The spirits decide strange paths." His eyes turned toward the lodge where Emily rested. "Tomorrow we learn her story. No one harms her." The discussion ended. That night Emily couldn't sleep. The sounds outside were unfamiliar. Drums. Crickets. Children laughing somewhere beyond the firelight. She slowly stepped outside. The desert sky stretched endlessly above her. She had never seen so many stars. Dakota sat alone near the edge of the camp, carving a small wooden horse with a hunting knife. He noticed her approaching but didn't speak. For several minutes they simply watched the sky. Finally Emily broke the silence. "You saved me." Dakota looked toward the mountains. "My father saved stranger once," he said. Dakota searched for the English words. "Hate grows easy. Hope grows slow." Emily repeated the sentence quietly. "Hope grows slow." She looked toward the camp where people who should have feared her had instead offered food, shelter, and medicine. Perhaps everything she believed about the Apache wasn't true. Perhaps everything Dakota had been told about settlers wasn't true either. Neither of them knew it yet. But beneath the endless desert stars, two lives from completely different worlds had just begun a journey that would test their courage, challenge everything they believed, and change the future of both their people forever. Far beyond the valley, however, another group of riders had discovered the trail leading toward the Apache camp. They were armed. They were determined. And by sunrise, they would arrive with a mission that threatened to destroy the fragile trust that had only just begun to grow. The first rays of dawn spilled across the valley, painting the red cliffs in shades of gold and amber. A cool breeze drifted through the Apache camp, carrying the scent of cedar smoke and fresh bread baking over small fires. Emily Carter woke to sounds unlike any she had ever known. Instead of wagon wheels creaking across dusty trails or the distant whistles of trains, she heard birds singing from the cottonwood trees, children laughing as they chased one another near the river, and women softly humming while grinding corn into flour. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then everything came rushing back. The attack. Her missing family. The Apache camp. Dakota. She sat up slowly inside the small lodge. The older woman who had cared for her the previous evening smiled warmly and handed her a wooden cup filled with herbal tea. "You rest better?" the woman asked in careful English. Emily nodded. "A little." The woman introduced herself by placing a hand over her heart. "Nita." Emily copied the gesture. "Emily." Nita smiled. The language between them was limited, but kindness needed very few words. Outside, Dakota was repairing a saddle beside the river. His movements were calm and deliberate, as though every task deserved patience. Emily watched him from a distance. He had hardly spoken since rescuing her, yet every action suggested quiet responsibility rather than coldness. As if sensing her presence, he looked up. "You sleep?" "A little." He nodded toward the cooking fire. "Eat." Emily accepted a piece of warm fry bread and sat across from him. For several awkward minutes, neither spoke. Finally, she gathered the courage. "Why did you help me?" Dakota stared into the fire before answering. "My mother said." He began slowly, searching for English words. "Every life belongs first to the Creator." Emily looked down. She had expected hatred. Instead, she kept hearing wisdom. Later that morning, Nita led Emily around the village. Children peeked curiously from behind their mothers before bursting into laughter when Emily smiled at them. One little girl boldly walked over and offered Emily a woven bracelet made from colored threads. Emily accepted it with surprise. "Thank you." The child grinned proudly before running back to her friends. The camp felt alive. Men repaired bows and fishing nets. Women prepared food and gathered herbs. Elders sat beneath the shade of ancient trees, telling stories to younger generations. Everything worked together like pieces of the same family. It wasn't the savage wilderness Emily had imagined from stories told back east. It was a community. That afternoon, Dakota invited Emily to walk with him into the surrounding hills. She hesitated. He noticed. "You choose." "Not an order. An invitation." After a long pause, she nodded. "I'll come." The trail climbed through towering rock formations where wildflowers somehow grew between cracks in the stone. Dakota stopped beside several green plants. He knelt and pointed. "Medicine." Emily crouched beside him. "For sickness?" "Yes." He carefully crushed one leaf between his fingers. A cool scent filled the air. He explained how different plants healed cuts, fevers, and snake bites. Emily listened with genuine curiosity. Her father had always believed the Apache knew the land better than anyone. Now she was beginning to understand why. Every plant seemed to have a purpose. Every trail held a lesson. As they continued walking, they reached a cliff overlooking the valley. The entire Apache village stretched below them. Smoke curled gently into the blue sky. Children played near the river. Horses grazed peacefully. "It is beautiful," Emily whispered. Dakota smiled faintly. "Home." The single word carried enormous meaning. Emily suddenly realized something. She missed her own home. Not the buildings. The people. Her father. Her younger brother Samuel. Tears quietly formed in her eyes. Dakota noticed immediately. "Family?" She nodded. "I don't know if they're alive." Silence settled between them. After a moment, Dakota removed a small leather pouch from around his neck. Inside rested a smooth white stone. He placed it gently in Emily's hand. "My father." She looked at him. "When I afraid, I hold." Emily carefully closed her fingers around the stone. It wasn't valuable because of money. It was valuable because someone had trusted her with it. "Thank you." That evening, laughter echoed through the camp. Several young men challenged one another in friendly competitions of horseback riding and archery. Children cheered loudly from the sidelines. Emily watched with fascination. One of the elders encouraged Dakota to compete. He reluctantly agreed. Within minutes, he guided his horse across the field with remarkable control. He fired arrows while riding at full speed, striking every target with calm precision. The crowd erupted into cheers. Emily couldn't help smiling. She finally understood why everyone respected him. Not because he was the strongest. Because he never showed off. His confidence came from discipline rather than pride. When the competition ended, Dakota quietly returned to repairing equipment instead of celebrating. As darkness approached, the tribal council gathered once more. This time, Emily was invited. She nervously stepped forward. The oldest elder studied her carefully. "Why do you travel west?" "My father wanted land," Emily answered honestly. "We hope to build a farm." Another elder asked, "Do you hate Apache?" The question caught her completely off guard. She remembered every frightening story she had ever heard growing up. She looked around the circle. The people who had fed her, protected her, treated her wounds. Slowly, she shook her head. "I don't anymore." Several elders exchanged thoughtful glances. The oldest smiled gently. Truth changes hearts. That night, Emily sat beside the river watching moonlight dance across the water. Dakota joined her without speaking. After several quiet moments, she finally smiled. "When I first saw you. You afraid?" She laughed softly. "Very afraid." "And now?" Emily thought carefully before answering. "I still don't understand everything." Dakota nodded. "Neither do I." They both laughed. It was the first genuine laughter either of them had shared since meeting. For the first time in days, Emily felt something she thought had disappeared forever. Hope. But neither of them noticed the faint glow of campfires burning on a distant ridge far beyond the valley. A troop of armed cavalry scouts had found tracks leading toward the Apache settlement. By sunrise, their peaceful world would face its greatest test yet. The peaceful silence of dawn shattered beneath the pounding of horses' hooves. Emily awoke to shouting outside the lodge. Apache warriors rushed toward the edge of the village, bows in hand. Mothers gathered frightened children and hurried them behind the larger shelters. Dogs barked wildly, sensing danger before anyone else could see it. Emily stepped outside. Dakota was already standing near the entrance of the camp, his bow resting in one hand. His eyes remained fixed on the eastern ridge. A cloud of dust slowly rose above the horizon. "They're coming," one young warrior whispered. Within minutes, nearly 20 cavalry scouts appeared on horseback. Their blue uniforms glistened beneath the morning sun. The officer leading them raised one hand. "Halt!" The horses stopped just beyond bow range. For several tense seconds, neither side moved. Emily felt her heart pounding. She recognized the uniforms immediately. United States Cavalry. The same soldiers her father had trusted to protect settlers traveling west. The commanding officer scanned the Apache camp before spotting her. His expression changed instantly. "There she is." He pointed directly toward Emily. "Miss Carter." Emily instinctively stepped forward. "I'm here." Several soldiers smiled with relief. "We've been searching for survivors since the attack." The officer looked toward Dakota. "Come with us." Emily hesitated. She glanced back at the Apache village. At Nita. At the children who had welcomed her. Finally, her eyes rested on Dakota. He remained silent. He hadn't stepped closer. He hadn't tried to stop her. Instead, he simply waited for her decision. That surprised her more than anything. The officer noticed her hesitation. "Miss Carter, these people are holding you against your will." Emily blinked. "No." The word escaped before she had time to think. "They saved my life." The soldiers exchanged confused looks. One of them muttered, "They've frightened her." Emily shook her head. "No one forced me to stay." The officer's jaw tightened. "Even so, you're coming with us." Dakota finally spoke. She choose. The officer glared at him. You don't get a say. Before the situation could worsen, the oldest Apache elder slowly stepped forward. He carried no weapon. Only a carved walking stick. He spoke calmly. The woman is free. If she wishes to leave, she leaves. The elder looked toward Emily. No chains. No fear. Only choice. Emily suddenly realized something. For the first time since the wagon train attack, someone had truly given her the freedom to decide her own future. She climbed onto one of the soldiers' horses. Before leaving, she turned toward Dakota. Thank you. He simply nodded. Walk in peace. Those 3 words somehow hurt more than a long goodbye. The cavalry rode east. Emily looked back one last time. Dakota stood exactly where she had left him, watching until the village disappeared behind the cliffs. 3 days later, the cavalry fort buzzed with activity. Doctors treated wounded settlers rescued from scattered wagon trains. Families searched desperately for missing loved ones. Emily's heart raced as she entered the medical tent. Then, Emily. She spun around. Her younger brother Samuel sprinted across the room. She dropped to her knees just as he threw his arms around her. Tears streamed down both their faces. I thought you were dead, Samuel cried. Emily hugged him tightly. So did I. Moments later, an exhausted doctor approached. I'm sorry. Emily looked up hopefully. My father? The doctor's silence answered before his words did. He didn't survive the attack. Emily felt as though the entire world had collapsed beneath her feet. The man who had raised her, who had taught her courage, who had dreamed of giving his children a better life, was gone forever. Samuel quietly squeezed her hand. Now, they had only each other. Life inside the fort should have felt safe. Instead, Emily felt strangely trapped. The soldiers constantly spoke about Apache raids. Settlers repeated frightening stories every evening. Yet every time someone described Apache warriors as heartless killers, Emily remembered Nita cleaning her wounds. The little girl who had given her the woven bracelet. Dakota standing between her and the mountain lion. The stories no longer matched reality. One afternoon she overheard 2 officers talking. The Apache village near Red Canyon. We attack next week. Emily froze. They've been helping raiders. No witnesses. Her blood ran cold. She knew it wasn't true. The Apache village had sheltered women and children. There had been no raiders. Only families. She rushed toward the command office. You can't attack them. The officer frowned. Miss Carter, these matters don't concern civilians. They saved my life. They're innocent. The room fell silent. Another officer spoke quietly. Sounds like you've been manipulated. Emily stared in disbelief. No. I saw the truth. The commanding officer dismissed her with a wave. Enough. The decision has already been made. That night Emily couldn't sleep. She walked outside the fort and looked west toward the distant mountains. Somewhere beyond those cliffs. Dakota had no idea what was coming. If she stayed silent, people who had shown her kindness would die. She made her choice before sunrise. She packed food, filled a water canteen, saddled a horse, and quietly slipped through the fort gates while everyone else slept. She wasn't running away. She was racing against time. Meanwhile, back at the Apache village, Dakota sat beside the river sharpening an old hunting knife. He hadn't spoken much since Emily left. Nita noticed. You miss her. He continued working. She belong with family. Nita smiled knowingly. And where does your heart belong? Dakota didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence revealed everything. Late that afternoon, one of the village scouts returned at full speed. Horses. Soldiers coming. The camp immediately prepared for evacuation. Women gathered supplies. Children climbed onto horses. Warriors took defensive positions. Dakota looked toward the eastern trail. Then, a lone rider appeared long before the soldiers. The horse stumbled into the camp. Emily leaped down before it had fully stopped. She struggled to catch her breath. They're coming. The cavalry. They'll be here by tomorrow morning. The entire village fell silent. Dakota stepped forward. You come back. Emily looked directly into his eyes. I couldn't let them hurt you. For the first time since they had met, Dakota reached out and gently took her trembling hands. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need words anymore. The truth was already there. Two people from completely different worlds had become the one thing neither had expected. Home. But as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, dozens of cavalry soldiers were already marching toward the valley. And by the next sunrise, love alone might not be enough to save either of them. The first light of dawn had barely touched the mountain peaks when the sharp cry of an Apache lookout echoed across the valley. The soldiers are here. The peaceful village instantly came alive. Children were lifted onto horses. Women gathered food, blankets, and medicine. The elders calmly directed everyone toward hidden trails leading deeper into the mountains. There was no panic. Only discipline. Dakota tightened the strap across his chest and picked up his bow. He looked toward Emily. You stay with Nita. Emily shook her head immediately. No. This is my fight too. Dakota's expression remained calm. If fighting starts, you protect the children. She wanted to argue. Instead, she nodded. She knew he was right. Saving lives mattered more than proving courage. From the ridge above the valley, Captain William Harris studied the Apache camp through a brass spyglass. There they are. His lieutenant frowned. Sir, there are women and children. Harris lowered the glass. Every camp shelters warriors. We finished this today. The younger officer hesitated. What about Miss Carter? Harris's face hardened. If she's still with them. She made her choice. The order was given. Nearly 50 cavalry soldiers began riding down the rocky slope. An Apache scout raced back toward the village. They're coming. Dakota gathered the remaining warriors. There were barely 20 of them. Most were hunters. Only a few had ever fought trained soldiers. The oldest elder stepped forward. No battle. We protect the people. Dakota nodded. Move everyone through the northern pass. The warriors spread out across the valley, buying time while families escaped. Emily helped Nita lift frightened children onto horses. One little boy clung tightly to her hand. Will they hurt us? Emily forced herself to smile. Not if we stay together. Inside, she wasn't nearly as confident. The first gunshot shattered the morning silence. Birds exploded into the sky. Then another. And another. The battle had begun. Dakota and the other warriors fired arrows from behind massive rocks, forcing the cavalry to slow their advance. The narrow canyon worked in the Apache's favor. The soldiers couldn't charge all at once. Captain Harris shouted commands. Spread out. Drive them into the open. Bullets struck the cliffs, sending pieces of stone flying through the air. Dakota remained astonishingly calm. Each arrow he released wasn't fired in anger. only to stop the soldiers from reaching the fleeing families. He wasn't fighting for victory. He was fighting for time. Emily guided several children along a hidden mountain trail. Behind her, smoke slowly rose from the village. She could hear distant gunfire echoing through the canyon. Every sound tightened the knot in her stomach. Suddenly, a frightened horse broke loose and raced toward the cliffs. A small girl screamed. "My brother!" The little boy had frozen in the middle of the path. Without thinking, Emily ran. The frightened horse charged straight toward the child. She reached him just in time, throwing both of them behind a large boulder. The horse thundered past only inches away. The little boy burst into tears. Emily hugged him tightly. "It's all right. I've got you." Nita looked at Emily with grateful eyes. "You protect our children." Emily realized something. They were no longer just Apache children. For this moment, they were simply children. Back in the canyon, the battle grew fiercer. Dakota climbed onto a rocky ledge to gain a better view. He spotted several cavalry soldiers moving toward the northern escape route. If they reached that trail, the women and children would be trapped. He immediately understood what had to be done. He turned toward his closest friend. "Take everyone north." "What about you?" "I stopped them. You can't fight them alone." Dakota smiled faintly. "I don't need forever. Only enough time." Before anyone could stop him, he sprinted across the ridge. The soldiers immediately focused on him. Captain Harris pointed. "There. After him." Exactly as Dakota had hoped. The cavalry abandoned the northern trail and chased him instead. Arrow after arrow flew from his bow as he disappeared deeper into the rocks. Every minute he delayed them meant another family escaped safely. Emily suddenly realized the gunfire had moved away from the village. She looked toward the canyon. Only one warrior remained visible. Dakota. Her heart dropped. No. She understood his plan instantly. He was sacrificing himself. Without another thought, she handed the children to Nita. "Keep going, Emily." But she was already running. Dakota reached a narrow cliff overlooking a deep ravine. His quiver held only 2 arrows. The soldiers slowly surrounded him. Captain Harris rode forward. "It's over." Dakota quietly placed his final arrow back inside the quiver. He had accomplished his mission. The families had escaped. That was enough. Just as Harris raised his pistol. "Stop." Everyone turned. Emily emerged from the rocks, breathless. She stepped directly between Dakota and the soldiers. Captain Harris stared in disbelief. "Miss Carter. Move aside." She didn't. "If you want to shoot him, you'll have to shoot me first." The canyon fell silent. One soldier lowered his rifle. Another looked away. Emily's voice trembled, but her eyes never left the captain. "This man saved my life. He protected women. He protected children. He could have killed me the day we met. He chose mercy." She pointed toward the valley below. "You call them savages. But they're the ones who showed me kindness." Captain Harris remained silent. Emily took another step. "If you destroy them today, you won't be defending civilization. You'll be destroying it." For several long moments, no one spoke. Finally, Harris slowly lowered his pistol. He looked at the exhausted soldiers surrounding him. Then toward the smoke drifting above the empty village. There were no warriors preparing another attack. No hidden army. Only abandoned homes. He had been wrong. "Stand down," he ordered quietly. The lieutenant blinked. "Sir?" I said. stand down." One by one, rifles were lowered. The battle was over. Hours later, as the cavalry disappeared beyond the mountains, the Apache families slowly returned to the valley. The village had suffered damage. Several homes had burned. But the people were alive. Because one man had chosen sacrifice instead of revenge. The oldest elder approached Dakota. "You carried the weight of many lives today." Then he looked toward Emily. "And she carried yours." Nita smiled through tears. "The Creator brought you together for a reason." As the sun set over the valley, Dakota and Emily stood side by side, watching children laugh again despite the scars of the day. For the first time, neither questioned where they belonged. Their hearts had already chosen. But peace would bring a different challenge. Both the Apache people and the nearby settlers would soon question whether two people from such different worlds could ever truly build a future together. Autumn arrived quietly in the valley. The fierce heat of summer gave way to crisp mornings, golden cottonwood leaves, and cool evenings filled with the comforting scent of cedar fires. Weeks had passed since Captain Harris ordered his soldiers to stand down. The scars of the battle remained, but life had slowly begun to heal. Together, the Apache families rebuilt what had been lost. New lodges rose where burned ones had once stood. Children once again chased each other through the village, laughing as though war had never touched their home. Emily worked beside everyone else. She carried logs, gathered herbs with Nita, helped prepare meals, and even learned how to weave blankets from dyed wool. No one treated her like a guest anymore. She had become part of the village. Yet, deep inside, one question still remained unanswered. Where did she truly belong? One afternoon, Emily stood beside the river washing blankets when Samuel appeared on horseback. For a moment, she couldn't believe her eyes. "Samuel." She ran toward him, embracing her younger brother tightly. "I've been looking everywhere for you," he said, relief filling his voice. "I thought I'd lost you again." Emily smiled through tears. "I've missed you." Samuel looked around the Apache village with cautious curiosity. "They've treated you well." "They saved my life," Emily replied. "And they've become my family." Samuel noticed Dakota repairing a fishing net nearby. The Apache warrior respectfully nodded. Samuel returned the gesture. There was an awkward silence between them. Finally, Samuel spoke. "I judged you before I ever met you." Dakota answered calmly. "So did many people." Samuel lowered his eyes. "I'm sorry." Dakota simply smiled. "The future matters more than yesterday." Those simple words lifted a burden Samuel had carried for weeks. That evening, Samuel shared important news. Captain Harris had reported the truth about the battle to his superiors. Instead of describing the Apache as enemies, he spoke of the lives they had spared and the innocent families they had protected. The government had agreed to open peaceful talks with nearby tribes. "It won't solve everything," Samuel admitted. "But it's a beginning." The village elders exchanged hopeful glances. For generations, they had dreamed of a day when their children would grow up without constant fear. Perhaps that day had finally begun. Several weeks later, the valley welcomed unexpected visitors. Not soldiers. Settlers. A small group of farming families arrived carrying tools instead of rifles. Among them was an elderly carpenter named Thomas Reed. He removed his hat respectfully before speaking. "We came to help rebuild." The Apache warriors looked at one another in surprise. Thomas smiled. "Captain Harris told us what really happened. He said we owed you more than thanks." Without another word, he picked up a hammer and began repairing one of the damaged storage buildings. Soon others joined him. Apache craftsmen and settler carpenters worked side by side. At first, conversation was limited. Different languages. Different customs. But shared work slowly built something stronger than words. Trust. One evening, while the sun dipped below the red cliffs, Dakota invited Emily to climb the same ridge where they had once watched the village together. The valley below looked different now. New lodges stood beside freshly built wooden cabins. Apache children played games with settler children near the river. Laughter echoed through the cool evening air. Emily smiled. "I never imagined this." "Neither did I," Dakota admitted. For several quiet moments, they simply admired the view. Finally, Dakota reached into the small leather pouch he always carried. He removed the smooth white stone his father had once given him, the same stone he had loaned Emily during her darkest moment. He gently placed it in her hand. "My father told me. A home is not only where you are born. It's where your heart chooses to stay." Emily looked into his eyes. "My heart chose long ago." Dakota took a slow breath. "In my people. When two hearts choose each other, the whole tribe celebrates." He hesitated, unusually nervous. "Emily Carter. Will you become my wife?" Tears filled her eyes before she could answer. She smiled. "Yes. I will." For the first time since they had met, Dakota wrapped his arms around her. The setting sun painted the valley in shades of gold as they stood together, no longer separated by fear or misunderstanding. The wedding took place beneath an ancient cottonwood tree beside the river. There was no grand church. No expensive decorations. Only family. Apache elders offered blessings in their native language. Samuel proudly stood beside his sister. Captain Harris, dressed in simple civilian clothes, attended quietly at the back of the gathering. When the ceremony ended, he approached Dakota. "I owe you an apology." Dakota shook his hand firmly. "The past is finished." Harris nodded. "I hope the future is kinder than the past." "So do I." As the evening celebration continued, drums echoed across the valley. Settlers and Apache families shared food around one enormous fire. Children danced together without caring who belonged to which culture. Old enemies became neighbors. Old fears slowly faded into stories of another time. Nita leaned toward Emily with a warm smile. "You came here as a frightened stranger." Emily looked around at the joyful faces surrounding her. "And now? You are our daughter." Emily embraced the older woman tightly. For the first time since losing her father, she no longer felt alone. She had found another family. Months passed. Winter snow dusted the mountain peaks. One quiet morning, Emily sat outside their lodge, watching Dakota carve a small wooden cradle. She laughed softly. "You've been working on that for days." He smiled. "It must be perfect." Emily gently placed his hand over her stomach. "I don't think the baby will mind." Dakota looked at her in surprise. Then understanding slowly spread across his face. His eyes filled with joyful tears. "Our child?" Emily nodded. "Our child." He knelt beside her, resting his forehead gently against hers. For a long moment, neither spoke. Words weren't enough. The dream they had once believed impossible was becoming real. A family born not from conquest or fear, but from trust, sacrifice, and love. Far above them, an eagle soared across the clear winter sky. The elders believed eagles carried prayers to the Creator. As it disappeared beyond the mountains, Dakota smiled. "Our son or daughter will grow up knowing both worlds." Emily squeezed his hand. "And maybe they'll help keep them together." The future was no longer a distant hope. It had already begun. Only one chapter remained, the legacy their love would leave for generations to come. Spring arrived in the valley with gentle rains that covered the hillsides in wildflowers. The river, once a silent witness to fear and conflict, now flowed peacefully between the Apache village and the growing settlement beside it. 3 years had passed. The scars of war had faded, replaced by gardens, orchards, and fields of corn that Apache families and settlers cultivated together. Smoke rose from both lodges and wooden cabins each morning, blending into a single ribbon beneath the blue sky. The valley had become something few believed possible. A home shared by 2 worlds. Outside their lodge, Emily sat beneath the old cottonwood tree, sewing a small buckskin shirt while watching a little boy race after butterflies. His laughter echoed across the meadow. "Daniel," she called with a smile. "Don't go too close to the river." The little boy stopped, waved happily, and shouted back, "Yes, Mama." Daniel had inherited his mother's bright blue eyes and his father's dark hair. Curious, fearless, and endlessly kind, he spent his days asking questions about everything around him. To the Apache children, he was one of them. To the settlers, he was the child who proved peace was possible. To Dakota, he was the greatest blessing the Creator had ever given him. Dakota walked over carrying a small wooden bow he had carved for his son. "I think someone is ready for his first lesson." Daniel's eyes grew wide with excitement. "A real bow?" Dakota laughed. "A small one. And the first lesson isn't shooting. It's learning when not to shoot." Daniel tilted his head. "Why?" Dakota knelt beside him. "A warrior protects life. He never takes it unless there is no other choice." Daniel nodded seriously, as if trying to remember every word. Emily watched them together, her heart overflowing with gratitude. Years ago, she had feared this man. Now she couldn't imagine life without him. Later that afternoon, riders approached the valley. The villagers paused, remembering darker days. But as the horses drew closer, smiles replaced concern. Captain William Harris rode at the front, now older, his hair touched with gray. Beside him were several government officials and tribal representatives. Dakota greeted them warmly. "What brings you here, Captain?" Harris smiled. "I retired 6 months ago. I thought it was finally time to visit as a friend." Emily embraced him. "We're glad you're here." The visitors gathered beneath the large cottonwood tree where the elders had called a council meeting. One of the officials unrolled a parchment. "Today," he announced, "we recognize this valley as protected land shared by both the Apache community and the settlement established here." A quiet murmur spread through the crowd. "The agreement guarantees that neither side will claim the land by force. It belongs to everyone who protects it." The oldest Apache elder slowly stood. His weathered face carried a peaceful smile. "For many winters, our people prayed for this day." That evening, the entire valley celebrated. Long tables overflowed with roasted venison, cornbread, fresh fruit, and stews prepared by Apache cooks and settler families alike. Music filled the air. Apache drums blended with fiddles brought west by pioneer musicians. Children danced together beneath strings of lanterns hanging from the trees. No one cared which tradition the songs came from. They simply celebrated together. Samuel, now married with children of his own, raised a cup. "To family." Everyone echoed the toast. "To family." Dakota looked around the gathering. Years earlier, these same people would have feared one another. Now they laughed together like old friends. The impossible had quietly become ordinary. As the celebration continued, Daniel wandered toward the river carrying his little bow. He noticed an elderly Apache man sitting alone on a rock. It was the oldest elder in the village. Daniel approached respectfully. "Grandfather, can I ask you something?" The elder smiled. "Always." Daniel sat beside him. "My friends say I'm Apache. My cousins say I'm a settler." He looked down at the water. "So, what am I?" The old man remained silent for a long moment. Finally, he picked up 2 small stones. One black. One white. He placed them together in Daniel's hand. Tell me. Which stone is stronger? Daniel studied them carefully. They're both strong. The elder smiled. Exactly. He gently closed the boy's fingers around both stones. You are not half of either. You are fully both. Never let anyone tell you that you must choose. Daniel looked toward the celebration where his parents stood together. A smile slowly spread across his face. I won't. As darkness settled over the valley, Dakota and Emily climbed the familiar ridge where so much of their story had begun. Below them, dozens of campfires glowed like tiny stars. Children laughed. Music drifted upward on the cool evening breeze. Emily rested her head against Dakota's shoulder. Do you remember the first time we stood here? Dakota smiled. You were afraid. Emily laughed softly. I was terrified. You barely spoke. I didn't know enough English. She smiled. And I didn't know enough about your people. Dakota looked toward the valley. We both had much to learn. Emily took his hand. And we still do. For several quiet moments, neither spoke. They simply watched their son running through the grass with children from both cultures. There were no walls between them. No fear. No hatred. Only friendship. The oldest elder slowly climbed the ridge, leaning on his carved walking stick. I thought I would find you here. He looked out across the valley. When you first arrived. I wondered if 2 hearts from different worlds could survive. He smiled gently. I was wrong. He turned toward Daniel playing below. Your love did more than survive. It became a bridge. The elder handed Dakota the smooth white stone that had once belonged to his father. You kept your father's promise. Dakota held the stone tightly. Strength is measured by whom you protect. The elder nodded. And today? You have protected the future. Years later, travelers passing through the valley often asked how such an unlikely community had come to exist. The elders always smiled before telling the same story. Not about a battle. Not about hatred. But about a frightened young woman who was shown mercy by an Apache warrior. And a man who chose compassion over revenge. Their love became more than a romance. It became a legacy. A reminder that fear can divide people for generations. But one act of kindness can begin healing them. And whenever the evening sun painted the mountains in shades of gold, the people of the valley would look toward the old cottonwood tree and remember the couple whose courage changed both of their worlds forever. The end.